it really has become a, quote, war. So in that sense, I use the phrase, I'm a war correspondent.
We were all heartbroken. I mean, the Planned Parenthood for our patients and our staff is a safe space, and this criminal violated that space.
Hi, I'm Evan Clark.
And I'm Seráh Blaine.
Welcome to this episode of the Humanist Experience, the podcast series where we seek out radical experiences that educate our emotions and expand our world.
On this episode, we'll be talking about abortion, but we won't be wading into the escalating political controversy.
We want to take a look at what actually happens when women decide to access abortion in the United States today.
When an intimate medical decision becomes part of a volatile public debate, how are patients and providers affected?
We've been seeing news clips of angry congressional hearings and hoax videos and legislation that makes it more and more difficult for abortion providers to operate.
But we felt disconnected from what's actually happening on the ground at clinics for women who decide they need abortion services.
So we looked for a family planning clinic that might help us get a better sense of the patient experience.
The clinic we reached out to was looking for volunteer patient escorts.
Escorts help patients avoid the harassment of protesters and so-called sidewalk counselors, both before and after their medical appointments.
Now, before we tell you about our experiences, let's get some of the backstory around patient escorts and why volunteers started organizing to take on this role.
Starting in the late 80s, there were very aggressive blockades. Starting in 1993, we had the first of what was to become eventually 9 murders of abortion providers. We started to see thousands of incidents of vandalism and harassment at the site of the clinics, at providers' homes. So it really has become a, quote, war. So in that sense, I use the phrase, I'm a war correspondent.
That's Dr. Carol Jaffe, professor at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health at the University of California, San Francisco. She is also the author of 4 books, including Dispatches from the Abortion Wars, The Costs of Fanaticism to Doctors, Patients, and the Rest of Us.
She's been studying the field of abortion provision through the lens of a sociologist since the late 1970s, just a few years after the famous Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision.
Dr. Jaffe gave us a quick history of the intense environment at clinics that gave rise to the need for clinic escorts.
After Roe was passed in 73, immediately you had a, quote, right to life movement spring up, which was and to this day remains extremely active. And right away, there started to be protests at clinics. Initially, these were largely peaceful.
Things started changing dramatically in 1987 and 1988 with the development of the aggressive Right to Life organization, Operation Rescue.
Then, for the first time, the country began to see massive attacks on clinics, including blockades that prevented people from getting in or out.
I mean, I still have very strong memories of, I was living in Pennsylvania in that period, and I remember one of my students worked at a clinic that was blockaded, and I remember I went to the clinic and I saw her waving to me from the basement window. She couldn't get out of the clinic. You had people chaining themselves to the doors of clinics. I mean, it was really incredibly disruptive, terrifying both for patients and for the people who worked in these facilities.
Between 1977 and 1994, the National Abortion Federation documented 5 murders of abortion providers,
11 attempted murders,
29 bombings,
124 incidents of arson,
311 bomb threats,
80 butyric acid attacks,
95 incidents of assault and battery,
2 kidnappings.
and the list goes on. The mounting violence and disruption became a clear threat to the safety of patients and providers. And in 1994, Congress attempted to intervene by passing the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Act, otherwise known as FACE.
FACE makes it a federal crime to use force, intimidation, threats, or physical obstruction to interfere with anyone trying to obtain or provide reproductive health services.
So these large-scale blockades tapered off, which has been very important. However, even though these blockades no longer take place, there still is very disruptive picketing, very disruptive harassment. So even though the FACE legislation made a really substantial difference, in many places there still is very aggressive presence of protesters at the clinic, and this is why clinic escorting is so incredibly important.
To see for ourselves a sliver of what women experience, we volunteered as escorts at a Southern California clinic that provides abortion care, and brought along our new portable mic. We apologize for the poor audio quality while on site. We're still learning.
The patient escorts at this clinic are organized by a group of dedicated volunteers who have been helping women get in and out of clinics since Operation Rescue.
So I'm going to go, so I can't even mind.
How long have you been doing this?
Since the 90s.
Yeah.
I thought it was done. I went to law school and came back, started practicing law here, and then we started up again. So
I was escorting when we had Operation Rescue, where we had 70 of them who'd storm the clinic and blockade the door. So, by definition, this is better.
The clinic was located in a commercial district. It was part of a strip mall. When we pulled into the clinic parking lot, we recognized the volunteers immediately by the bright yellow shirts that read Patient Escort and Escolta Paciente in thick black print.
We didn't see any protesters, and the so-called sidewalk counselors weren't immediately obvious, but the clipboards and literature in their hands made them apparent as they weaved between cars to reach us as we parked.
With me driving and Seráh in the passenger seat, we matched the profile both the escorts and anti-abortion counselors were watching for.
Patients aren't supposed to drive themselves after a procedure, so typically a woman is driven to the clinic, often by a husband or boyfriend, sometimes a friend or relative.
As Seráh stepped out of the car, a woman wearing a plain white baseball cap and white canvas shoes briskly walked towards her, asking if she was here to see the doctor. The sidewalk counselor had reached us before the patient escorts, who were walking quickly toward us to intervene.
I didn't answer or make eye contact through my sunglasses, and the woman immediately turned her attention to Evan. She handed him a baby blue brochure that said, "A few things you should know regarding this clinic."
The brochure listed case numbers of lawsuits against the doctor providing abortions at the clinic, with the most frightening words like wrongful death and emotional suffering in big, bold font.
Case number 450876, personal injury and wrongful death. Case number 467318, malpractice, negligence. Case number 484798, negligence and wrongful death. Case number 490468, wrongful death, malpractice, personal injury, emotional suffering. Case number 49.
She also kept trying to get us to look at a grainy photo of an ambulance parked outside the strip mall in front of us.
They're all the lawsuits that are going against them. We're just trying to warn the women. That's all. You know, it's their choice, but I mean, God, give them a decent doctor to do it. This man's 70.
This is a technique referred to by anti-abortion organizers as the Chicago method. A sidewalk counselor handbook we found online explains.
The Chicago method was pioneered by the Pro-Life Action League in Chicago and entails educating women about litigation, particularly for malpractice, against the abortion facility. While a woman might or might not trust you, she may likely be concerned to learn that her abortionist is facing a lawsuit.
Given that about 75% of OB/GYN doctors have faced a malpractice claim by the age of 45, it's pretty safe to bet that any doctor providing family planning care will have a handful of claims filed against them.
And we noticed none of the outcomes of those claims against the doctor at the clinic or the dates of the claims were listed on the brochure. We do know, though, that 78% of all malpractice claims do not lead to payments.
But we were there for a volunteer assignment, so we didn't get into it with the counselor. And once the patient escorts reached us, they firmly and politely shut down the conversation.
So if you don't want to talk to them, all you have to do is tell them I don't want to talk to you and back away.
The patient escorts, both women who had been volunteering for nearly 2 decades, explained the local city ordinance on clinic access that has protections beyond the federal legislation, and also what we could expect from the counselors.
It says if you tell them you don't want to talk to them and back away, they have to stop and back away. They kind of follow it, kind of sometimes, or sometimes not. They're not supposed to get on the sidewalk. They're supposed to stop at the curb, but sometimes they follow it, sometimes they don't. Okay.
We got a quick rundown of the do's and don'ts of patient escorting, carefully watching every car that drove into the parking lot while we talked.
Watching for young couples sometimes meant awkward moments for the customers of the furniture store one door down from the clinic.
An event hosted by one of the neighboring businesses caused traffic in the strip mall to be higher than usual, but workshop attendees were quickly distinguishable from patients by their suits and plastic name tags.
As cars pulled in, we paused, made a quick assessment of whether the occupants could be headed to the clinic, then went back to chatting.
Best when you're with them to keep your hands behind your back or in your pocket so they can't claim that you struck them or hit them or touch them and then file charges against you. Okay. That's basically don't engage, don't get into an argument with them. You're not going to change their mind. They're not going to change your mind. Yep. So, niceties are fine, but, we've had instances where people have gone at each other arguing. It doesn't help anybody.
In the middle of getting our instructions, a small car with a young man driving and a young woman in the passenger seat pulled up and parked in the back corner of the lot.
The volunteers with us started jogging toward the couple, and so did the sidewalk counselor who had approached us when we arrived.
One of the escorts quickly threw Seráh a bright yellow t-shirt, and suddenly, we were on the move.
Throw it on? You're on duty. I'm on duty, all right.
The family planning clinic is on the second floor of the strip mall. To reach it, patients have to take an elevator right next to the furniture store beneath the clinic, or walk almost a full block to the ends of the mall and go up a set of stairs.
A few of the sidewalk counselors ambled around the parking lot, coming up to cars as they parked, while another handful of them stood across from the elevator, hoping to intercept women before they got to the sidewalk.
Our goal was to get to the women before the anti-abortion activists, put ourselves between the patients and the so-called counselors, and walk them to the elevator with as little disruption as possible.
The lady in the baseball cap reached the couple just seconds before we did, but she didn't get much of an opportunity to interfere with them. The patient and her companion were quickly surrounded on all sides by escorts, 5 of us, and the counselor had to shout past us.
Not much of a counseling technique.
You do need to hear it. No, we don't. It's the truth. All right. There you go. Thank you very much.
Things were mostly quiet for the next hour or so, and we chatted with other escorts, almost all of whom had stories of volunteering during the 80s and 90s, when things weren't so quiet.
What was awful is when we had Operation Rescue, we'd keep them out of the inside of the clinic, because if they got inside the clinic, they destroyed records, threw everything around, pulled records off the shelves, totally invaded, then sat down and chained themselves to the furniture, and spilled, really wrecked the clinic. So we wanted, at all costs, even if they got into the building, to keep them out of the clinic. So we would make sure the clinic door was locked, and then we'd put 4 or 5 escorts or 6 or 8 escorts with their arms linked in front of the clinic door. And they'd get blockaded in behind these guys until they got arrested. And that was a tough gig. Because you'd have to sit there for 2, 3, 4 hours. Because once the clinic's blockaded, nobody's going in and out for 3 or 4 hours. Nobody's going in or out for 3 or 4 hours.
Our most intense moment of the day happened when one of the anti-abortion regulars showed up. Volunteers told us this guy was one of the most forceful, fanatical counselors they have to deal with.
We're leaving at like 10:10 or something.
What is that?
The Horn of Freedom.
My favorite.
Yeah, the horn.
She comes every couple weeks to blow the horn for Jesus.
Horn of Gondor.
Oh, this dude is the most aggressive.
Oh God, yeah, this guy was telling you who stands behind me and smiles.
He like my nightmares.
In the white shorts?
The guy with the American flag hat who just walked up smiling.
Okay.
He like has actually like lied to people like in front of me like a lot. Like it's like he's just here to like means to an end sort of thing.
As another young couple pulled into a parking spot, we saw how important escorts can be to making sure patients actually receive freedom of access to clinics.
While a young woman and her companion started opening their car doors, the counselors, including the guy in the American flag hat, raced the escorts to meet her.
The logistics of where this couple had parked dramatically intensified the situation. The passenger's door opened next to a curb with heavy landscaping, shrubs, trees, and bushes.
That meant the patient had to walk between the car and the curb to get to the open parking lot and walk to the clinic. But the counselors stood both at the rear passenger door and near the front passenger side tire, trapping her between them, the car, and the bushes.
The woman's eyes widened. She looked terrified, and there was no way for us to get between her and the counselors without physically pushing them, something we'd been warned against doing.
But the thing you got to remember, there is no choice up there. They want your money. They're going to get you to sign a waiver so they don't get sued, and they want to take your money. They're not going to tell you about adoption. They're not going to tell you on the pink sheet. It's going to tell you all the things.
We tried to insist that the anti-abortion activists move, but Flag Hat Guy didn't budge from the rear of the car.
Excuse me, sir, don't mind.
You can't block her. You can't block her. Yeah.
Just read it.
Walking. We're here from the clinic. I'm sorry.
They really don't care about you. They just want to take the money.
Oh, me too. I'm with the clinic. We're with the clinic. We're just trying to get you in.
And we're just trying to help you, sir.
I realize it's confusing, but that's why we're wearing matching t-shirts. We're with the clinic. There you go.
The anti-abortion activists blocking the other side of the car finally backed up and let the woman pass, but the counselors continued to surround them. The young woman was in tears by this point, and her companion looked frustrated, angry, and scared all at once.
We walked around the car and joined the couple and other escorts, putting ourselves between the counselors and couple. The activists were showing the same grainy ambulance picture we had seen earlier, along with a pastel pink brochure that read,
"Pregnant? Worried? What you need to know before you choose."
The pink brochure is an example of what anti-abortion organizations refer to as the basic literature method. The Sidewalk Counselor Handbook used by pro-life organizations tells us,
The literature method can be as simple as providing abortion-bound women and men with a brochure that provides critical information, including the harms of abortion and contraception, or crisis pregnancy alternatives available to them. The literature method might be preferred at abortion facilities with parking lots where you might only get a few seconds to interact with them.
This particular handbook doesn't teach sidewalk counselors about the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Act, but maybe it should, since we were seeing clear violations of it.
We were able to help that young couple get past the aggressive sidewalk counselors, but they were visibly shaken up by the experience, and they weren't better prepared to make an important personal medical decision.
The sidewalk counselors kept insisting they were providing options and information the, quote, abortion industry won't tell you about.
But all of the medical risks in the pink brochure, minus the part about the spiritual consequences and the debunked breast cancer link, are provided by abortion clinics.
They do provide resources for adoption and parenting. We know abortion providers make sure women have information about their options. And we know this because of Seráh's experience.
In 2003, when my daughter Lois was a baby still nursing, I had an abortion. Now, I lived in Illinois where there's no state mandate that a specific list of side effects be provided, and the state does not require a waiting period. But when I went to Planned Parenthood for my scheduled surgery, I was provided with tons of medical information about the risks and side effects of the surgery. I also met with the clinic social worker after my ultrasound to go over all my options. She gave me referrals, including one to an organization in walking distance that offered adoption and parenting services. And then she asked me if I wanted to go home and take some time to think about it because I didn't seem comfortable with my decision. So I did. I took her advice. I went home and gave myself time to decide. I was religious at the time, and I talked to my pastor. I talked to my primary care doctor, my mom, my husband, and my closest friends. When I came back several days later, I was well prepared emotionally and confident in my decision.
Unlike Seráh's experience, sidewalk counselors are making it more difficult for women to think clearly about an important decision. They're actually creating a harmful, emotionally charged environment. It was disturbing to watch.
Seeing that young woman cornered by anti-abortion activists, scared, crying, it unnerved both of us.
God, that sucked the way they cornered her.
The tension. Oh my God, yeah, she was cornered. There was no...
I know. I was trying to get... I should have walked faster because I saw that he was going that way.
That's so frustrating to me. My heart rate was going skyrocketing because she couldn't get out.
I know, I was really worried about that.
Like, how do you can even run if you want to.
When the two most combative counselors came up to Seráh and me after the encounter and started talking, I decided to take a new tactic.
I told the men I was not in the mood for a conversation. So Evan used the opportunity to draw them away from the main part of the parking lot.
We're just trying to help women. We're trying to help people make good decisions.
Yeah, she didn't want to hear this conversation. She was saying she didn't want to talk to you, so if you want to talk to me, we can chat over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to help people. We're saving babies and saving the lives of women.
For the next hour, the two sidewalk counselors witnessed to me about their anti-abortion ministry, and I did my best to hear out their perspective and keep them talking.
You got to pay attention because when you die, it's too late. You've made that decision.
Right.
You know? Why would you do that? Why would you take a chance on being condemned in hell forever when you could open that door over here and go down that path? If you don't believe, that's fine. Ask the Holy Spirit.
While the most aggressive counselors debated Pascal's wager with Evan, the other patients who came to the clinic that morning were able to get in and out without incident.
We came away from the experience understanding that Dr. Jaffe had been right. Patient escorts are absolutely needed to ensure women have access to the medical care that's supposed to be safeguarded by law.
Sidewalk counselors really do have a lot of power to emotionally unsettle patients, as well as physically impede them from being able to get into medical clinics.
Just to reemphasize how important what a morale booster it is to people who work in clinics when they have volunteer escorts, how important it is to the patients themselves. So, your focus on this piece on escorting is incredibly important, and I'm very grateful to you for doing it.
A few days after our escort experience, someone set fire to the Thousand Oaks Planned Parenthood I used when I was in college.
The fire that was set on the morning of October 1st at Thousand Oaks was contained by our sprinkler system. But however, as a result of all of the water that essentially we needed to put out the fire, there was extensive damage. And the damage was estimated at about $150,000.
That's Julie Mickelberry, the Vice President of Public Policy and Communications at Planned Parenthood of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties.
She told us this act of violence occurred in the middle of the night, so no one was in the building, and staff and patients were all safe. But the clinic was closed for 5 days as water damage was repaired and the window replaced.
We were all heartbroken. I mean, the Planned Parenthood for our patients and our staff is a safe space. It's a place where women come to get the care they need to live the lives they want. And this criminal violated that space. And so, I think that we were heartbroken, but we were very resilient and resolved to continue providing the care that we know that our community needs.
Our experiences volunteering as escorts and the recent arson attack on my home clinic are unsettling. The abortion debate isn't just taking place in Congress and in the media. It's violating the personal space of women who have to navigate reproductive health care decisions.
We saw that the sidewalk counselors weren't actually giving women better information, but were instead creating a disorienting, emotionally charged environment that inhibits women from making clear-headed decisions about their own pregnancies.
We saw firsthand how women are impeded from accessing medical care and from making medical decisions without harassment. It's a very real problem, and one that's been affecting women and their providers for longer than I've been alive.
There has been an uptick of incidents across the country, but Planned Parenthood has been experiencing harassment and attacks like these for decades. The recent attacks are really a part of a longer, broader, coordinated effort to undermine Planned Parenthood, to ban abortion, and to limit access to reproductive health care.
It's a daunting challenge, but if we believe in the universal value of health and autonomy, we need to stand against the political ploys that impede women's access to care.
We need to participate in creating safe spaces for women to make medical decisions without harassment.
We need to volunteer, and we need to be vocal. Women deserve to be free from the constant politicization of their medical care.
We can't afford to be emotionally distant from the volatility that shapes the environment around women's healthcare.
We need to be connected to women's experiences and committed to women's right to dignity and autonomy.
And as Carol Jaffe explains, there are many tangible things that we can do.
I hope your podcast listeners will realize the 3 most important things they can do, in my opinion. 1, escort at clinics. 2, work very hard to defeat politicians who are imposing these restrictions. And 3, to the extent they're able, to financially support these various abortion funds. I mean, for example, even in California, Medi-Cal will pay for an abortion. But if you're 15 years old, if you don't have a driver's license, if you live hours away from the nearest clinic, you need bus fare, you need a place to stay. Some abortion procedures actually take place over a couple days. So even in the bluest of the blue, like New York and California, poor women still need help.
If you would like to support the work of the folks you heard in this episode, please visit our website at humanistexperience.com.
Once again, that's humanistexperience.com. That's where you'll find links for supporting Planned Parenthood
and WRRAP, a national fund helping women gain access to safe, legal abortion services and emergency contraceptives.
Special thanks for this episode go to
our life coach, Gustavo Youngberg,
our guests,
Dr. Carol Jaffe,
Julie Mickleberry,
and the many outstanding people who volunteered with us as patient escorts.
And we can't forget our producer and narrator, Andre Saleh, at Unbelievers Media LLC.
The Humanist Experience is produced in collaboration with Spectrum Experience, Unbelievers Media LLC, and the Skeptic Examiner.
We're your hosts, Evan Clark
and Seráh Blaine, and we'll see you next time. Well, when you're done playing with yourself...
Hey.
My stand just needs a little tinkering with.
Twisty hands
Oh,
there.
yeah, you know it.
Up and down, up and down. Rotate a little bit. Stroke it with your thumb.
And no teeth. Okay.
Yeah, no teeth. Unless specifically requested.